Hi, everybody, and welcome to Global Badass Goddess channel. We're going to be doing a 4-part series of magic and the archetypes, and I'm going to be featuring the amazing Tim Converse. So welcome to that. This is the beginning of our 4-part series. I'm very excited. Let me just tell you a little bit about Tim. Tim Converse is a professional musician and entertainer, and he goes by Santiago. Santiago's magic, and we'll talk more about that. Tim is dedicated to providing unique magical experience on a personal level, and I can attest to that. He's based in Santa Cruz, California. He's been studying art and history of magic for nearly 3 decades, bringing his magic to audiences all around Santa Cruz, Monterey, Silicon, and even Las Vegas. You can catch him live and on Zoom. In the meantime, let's see, he's become a magic member of the Academy of Magical Arts, which is famously known as the Magic Castle. I had the fortune of being able to be there once. He is also an instructor at Jeff McBride's Magic and Mystery School in Las Vegas. He's considered to be one of the top magic schools in Las Vegas, and in real life, Hogwarts, as Tim would say. Having the experience of working and found his own special connection, style, and connection with people, I feel he's natural and authentic, and it feels like you're truly a part of something otherworldly, and you become magic too. So it's very exciting. And thank you so much, Tim, for joining us today on our channel. How are you? Hi.
Hi. This will be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, us too. I know. I've been really psyched about this 4-part magic series of archetypes. Never thought about it from that perspective. And when you started to share that, I was like, wow, that's deep. That's amazing. So anyway, I just wanted to just preface that, and also maybe have you jump in. Would you mind showing us a little piece of magic? I think that would be fun.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great.
I'm going to show you something that's kind of really indicative of the initial archetype of magic, which is the trickster. And we'll definitely break into all of these as we go along. The trickster is very much the very beginning of magic for a lot of magicians, because it's the stage of learning. It's the stage of getting all of the things together, but there's no mastery, or if there is, that mastery is still on a different level where they haven't grown into themselves yet.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of the version of, here, let me show you something real quick, and then bang, and they're done. So I have here this little container, and I think you can see that. Yeah. There's a die in there, yeah?
Yeah.
And this is a great trickster effect, I think, because there's not a lot going on here other than we know that there's that die in there, but with just a little bit of a shake, it transforms into a whole handful of dice.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Little tiny ones just like that. Now, there's not a whole lot more to it. It's just it's a piece of eye candy to show you, and that's the kind of thing, that's the stage where a trickster is. But these archetypes are about a path, and that path, as you evolve and you grow, as my teacher has been pounding into us lately, because he's very adamant about understanding these, it's taking that eye candy and eventually turning it into soul food.
Interesting. Yeah.
Jeff is very good at creating. Jeff is my teacher, Jeff McBride.
Yeah.
And he's very, very good at creating those phrases and putting a lot of thought into just a couple of words to make you really latch into it and hold on to it.
Wow.
So that idea of taking eye candy and turning it into soul food is a really great way to frame the thinking about all this path.
Yeah. And it was simple. It's just really simple. For everyone that's listening right now, I don't necessarily know if everybody understands archetypes or whatever,
Sure.
and especially Trickster. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So when we talk about in the magic school, when we talk about the 4 archetypes, what we're talking about, I'll just name them. We're talking about the trickster, and then the sorcerer, and then the oracle, and finally the sage. And there's a lot of different ways of looking at them. The first easiest way to grasp them is to think of them as a timeline, where the trickster is somebody who's very new, the sorcerer is someone who has learned a lot and is demonstrating power, the oracle is someone who has moved beyond that into a level of introspection where they're turning their power inward. And then from there is the final step, the sage, which is combining all of those things into a total character, into a total mastery. That's a very, very shorthand way of thinking about it. And there's a lot of depth in each one of those characters, each one of those states that tie into not just magic, but tie into, well, I believe pretty much any art form, if you think about it, that path of learning and growing and mastery and achieving ultimately whatever it is you want to achieve in your art is a path all artists walk down, no matter what they're doing.
Yeah.
The archetypes have simply been an interesting way for the magician to think about their role, not just as a magician, but their role within society and things like that. And these archetypes really come from a lot of the very historical sources. They come from the heroes, the basic hero's journey storyline and things like that, those things that are foundational to culture in general.
Right. And for those of you that...
there's a lot to unpack.
Right. And I was just going to say, sorry, Tim, I was going to say, for those of you that don't know the hero's journey, it's Joseph Campbell. You can check that out. But yeah, it's interesting to think of the trickster as maybe a really young, I don't want to say young person, but like a novice, right? Someone that's just starting out in life or whatever on their journey in a craft, or, just trying to relate that to everyone listening. And like you said, all of us are there at some point. Anytime we embark on something that we wanted to do, I mean, and you eventually get to a stage, hopefully, that you're at the sage space, where you've mastered something. But yeah, that's amazing. So you take that. How do you utilize that inside your magic with the trickster? How does that work? Or is it just an identifier?
It's easier maybe to think of all of these archetypes as identifiers.
Okay.
Because no matter where you are in whatever journey, whatever path you're doing, whether it be magic or music or anything else, you're going to bounce around in all of this stuff. There's always something new to learn. So you're always going to go back and revisit the trickster over and over again. There's always, once you've started to visit something new, there's always that stage of, I've really started to grasp this, and so now I'm going to test it out. I'm going to push the limits of it, and that's very much a sorcerer.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's okay. Now I've got that. What do I want to do? How do I want to make this speak for me? And now we're back into the oracle. And once you go from there again, you're like, okay, I've learned all of this. I've figured this out. Now it's my job to share this with someone else. That's my job as the sage. So this path, these positions that you can be in, we can inhabit them moment to moment, depending on what's going on. There are, and we can combine them. There are great examples of magicians who combine the sorcerer and oracle together, or the sage and the trickster together, or any combination you want to make. It's as much about the message you want to give out as anything else. And those archetypes are just, they're broad strokes, and it becomes something that you can then utilize to create the message you want to give, the message that you want to send.
Interesting. Yeah. That is interesting. Huh. I'm like, where do we go from here? It's like, that's part of when you're talking to somebody, you're like, oh, I understand that, identify with that. And then you're like, well, I wonder what the question would be for other people.
Well, yeah. I can say, for example, that the question of the trickster is one I still struggle with constantly. The reality is that, as you mentioned early in my little bio, is that I've been performing magic. I've been studying this for, about 30 years now. But the reality is that for the first several years, what would have been my trickster stage, in terms of learning to begin, I had no mentor. I had no teacher. I had nobody to go to or listen to. I was very, very self-taught. And it wasn't and the reason for that was simply that there weren't any magic clubs or magicians in my immediate area that I was aware of. I was, in order to get to the nearest magic shop, I had to drive like an hour to go someplace. Yeah. And most of what I was learning from books and things like that. And so it was very much a solo study.
Interesting.
And with regards to that, I kind of missed the essential lessons of the trickster as a result of that, because I just didn't know what I was looking for.
Right.
I didn't have a context to pay attention to. And it was later on, a few years after I'd been doing it for a while, that I finally met my teacher, Jeff, and started to be redirected into this path. And that redirection is something that's taken, 20 of those 30 years at this point, more or less. And it's been fascinating to learn all of it. And as I said, we bounce around back and forth. Every time magic, as a musician, there are just a limitless number of musical instruments that you could learn, and musical styles that you could study, and all of those things. Yeah. The same thing is true in magic. Every time I turn around, there's something new for me to learn. Yeah. And I am an insatiable learner. Yeah. So I'm constantly revisiting the trickster, but getting my head around the trickster is a challenge.
That's so interesting, especially when you started related. I started like, oh, okay, yeah, looking at through my art form, which is singing, songwriting, performing. And I've played guitar for a while, since I was probably 13, but at some point, like, I stopped. I had an early day teacher, and he totally turned me off to guitar, and I stopped touching it. And it's like, if I would have been more inspired or whatever, to find another teacher or whatever, I probably would have been in a different space I probably would have been in Sage at this point with the guitar, and but I went on, and I'm in Sage space with singing and songwriting, but more like Sage space with singing and performing. But that's interesting, because I was just looking at that, then I popped over to, I'm going to play mandolin. I'm going to play guitar again, and then singing myself at Trickster, and having the sage brain being frustrated at the trickster inside me.
Exactly. Yes. But that frustration, even that is part of the trickster lesson, because frustration, the idea of, and in the magic context, me doing this little thing for you here, Like, what's the first reaction that anybody has when they see magic is, how did you do that?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's the magician's job to say, well, very well. I did it very well. Or, something like that. I'm not going to tell you how I did it.
Of course.
Because that would be, obviously for the magician, I'm giving away a secret, but it's also a part of the lesson of the trickster. The trickster's message in general is, I know something you don't know, in order to tempt you into trying to find out more.
Interesting.
Because if you're really committed, then you might get taught, right? You might find your mentor at that point.
Right.
And in fact, that's exactly how I got my apprentice, years and years and years ago. She was the only person who, instead of asking, how did you do that, asked me, how do I become a magician?
I want to do that. Yeah.
And it's not that easy, obviously, but because she asked that question, it was like, okay, now we can have a serious conversation about that.
Yeah. Brilliant. I never thought of it from that perspective, but how you're breaking everything down into the four levels. But you can relate that to life too. I mean, it doesn't have to be through a practice or an art form, or you can relate it to just your children, or your relationship. Yes. Where are you at in your relationship, right? Like there are moments where it's new, and you walk into an argument or something, and it becomes this new thing, because you need to approach it really from a new place, because you have to rediscover something about yourself.
Yes.
Hopefully.
And that's the truth of any of these types of journeys, that is ultimately about discovering yourself.
Yeah.
And what it is that you can then share with the world because of what you've found out.
Yeah. Your experience. And I think that's so important to know that, you and I are having an experience together, and we're also having one separately. And both is important and valid and amazing. And then we can have the opportunity to reflect back with each other what our experiences were too. So I think that's one of the magic moments of life, actually. So, but you have to be present to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what would you, in your style of music, in your style of magic, musical magic, how would you describe it?
That is a really challenging question. And the reason why I say that is because I'm still feeling, it's been 30 years and I'm still feeling my way out into what I want to do. I know that for the most part, I have long since passed through my trickster phase and my sorcerer phase, and that I am much more intrigued and inspired by the oracle and the sage. And you've known me long enough to know that I can't help but teach when I have an opportunity to. Right. If you want to know something that I happen to know something about, you can't stop me.
You're the best.
And that's very much that's very much a sage quality. But the idea that the oracle is about introspection as much as anything else, about trying to figure out what's going on within yourself. Well, I'm very deep into the middle of that with my magic these days, is that I'm trying to figure out what is the message I want to send for the most part. What makes me the happiest when I'm performing that magic? I have recently discovered more and more that my comfort zone as a magician is in a stage environment. Of course, under COVID, we have a different problem going on here, but this is still a stage if I set it up right. So yeah. I can still do this. I've found that I'm happier when I'm doing things that are a benefit. So yeah. I've done, the last mini shows that I've been doing have been things like for the local library system, because I'm going in to teach kids. I'm doing a little magic, and I'm sending the message of books are good. Because, you know, they always ask the same question. How did you learn to become a magician? Well, I did it because of that shelf of books over here.
Right.
You know, and that's, you know, the real secrets are in those books. So I'm encouraging the summer reading program.
So
I'm
great.
encouraging reading, and it makes me happier to do that. As you know, we just recently had all these big fires here that have been going on, and we had to evacuate, and there was a lot of trauma going on and all of that. But now that people are back, one of the things that I want to do is put together a show so that I can raise some money for the local fire department, which is an entirely voluntary fire department.
Wow.
And, you know, they can use that support. And it's when I find a cause that I seem to enjoy my magic the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's something that tells me where my oracle is, where I'm going.
Yeah. I totally get that about you, Tim. You're that way with everyone across the board, whether it's, you know, the fire department, the library, or me. You know, it's just you're just so there for. You're one of the most authentic, down to earth, honest, and deeply caring human beings I've met in my life, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to know that about you and who you are. I'm actually moved, and anybody that you've ever introduced me to or supported me through my life, you know, it's deeply moving and deeply touching. And your willingness to take up arms, so to speak, and roll up your sleeves, so to speak, has been phenomenal. So from the bottom of my heart, I say thank you dearly. And yes, and for those of you guys listening, Tim lives in the Boulder Creek area, so they were under that serious fire that pretty much decimated a beautiful forest of redwoods that I love. But we're grateful that your house didn't get touched in your back, and that you get to, you get to support everybody up there and that wonderful community. I love that community up there. So so I definitely thank you for hanging out with us. I think we're gonna again, like I said, everybody, we're gonna do a 4-part series, and we're gonna kind of dive in to each one of these archetypes. And I'm going to ask Tim how we're going to do that, and we're going to get into it. So I think it'll be really fun, and I think it would really support everyone in their own space to find out and to utilize these archetypes for your own life. So I think that'd be really powerful. So I have a couple more questions for you, Tim, and then we'll kind of wrap it up here. But I wanted to ask you, how did you come up with Santiago?
So I am also among the various and sundry things that I do, and really this actually ties into how I got into magic in the first place. Well, one of the reasons is I participate in this thing called the Society for Creative Anachronism, or SCA for short, and which is a worldwide organization that studies medieval history. And when I first joined, when you play in this group, you are supposed to assume a name and take on a persona and all those sorts of things to make it more fun. For people who aren't quite sure, they can think of this as kind of you're playing at Renaissance Fair or something like that. And initially, when I joined the SCA, I was actually portraying. I picked a Scottish persona, and I was playing around with that for a little while. But it didn't really suit me. And my own heritage includes some Spanish and things like that. So I started digging into some other stuff, and I found that I really liked some of the historical aspects of Spain and Portugal and the Spanish Moorish culture and all of that. And I was going to use the name Antonio for a while. I was thinking about that name. And a good friend of mine who was in the middle of writing a novel absolutely lost her mind when I mentioned it, because her main character in that novel was named Antonio, and she didn't want to mix the two up.
Oh my God.
And I said, well, then help me research names. And she's the one who ended up discovering the name Santiago, and I really liked it. I'm like, oh, that's a cool name. That's really good. And so from that point on, I did additional research and documented how to use the name, and that's what I became in the SCA. I became Santiago, and after I was Santiago for a little while, then I was involved with an acting troupe, which I'm still involved with. That's part of the SCA. That there was another person in that troupe who was a magician. Who there was, one evening that we'd all gotten together to rehearse whatever play it was that we were rehearsing. And it was like 2 days after I'd just seen David Copperfield on television doing a particular magic trick that I was like, I want to know how to do that. And he knew. So he and I ended up trading magic tricks with each other. I taught him one he didn't know. He taught me that one. And it was never looked back from there. Santiago became a magician at that point.
Wow.
And I, because I was involved in this organization, which is focused on historical learning and research, I dove headfirst into doing research into medieval magic.
Wow.
All the performance magic and all the rest of that stuff that comes along with it, and eventually became a peer in the SCA. Essentially became a member of the Order of the Laurel, which nobody would necessarily know what that means, but if you think about it as a knighthood for arts and sciences, that's what I got. So I became a master magician, if you will. So that was, and that's where Santiago comes from. That's where all of that comes from. And when I started doing magic shows on a more professional level, for a while, I was doing them as the medieval character. I would dress up in my medieval garb and I would come out and I would do my show that way.
Fine.
And I still do from time to time.
Yeah.
But now Santiago is a bit more wide ranging in what era he plays around in at any given time.
That's so cool.
So yeah, it's that's where the name comes from. That's where the character comes from, and it's been an evolutionary process from the beginning.
Wow. Well, a couple more things. So one just came to mind. You are now an executive producer of a online TV show called Burn the Witch. Is that right?
Burn. That's
Burn
correct.
The Witch.
Yes.
You can give it a little plug here.
I'm only just digging into this a little bit, but I am the reason why I found out about it at all is my other apprentice in the SCA, Katie Hurling, is one of the actors and producers of the show. And so she was like, hey, I just want you people to know about this thing. And what it is it's going to be an 11-part web series telling a story about a coven of witches who are being hunted one at a time. And it's in a modern day context, right? Mm-hmm. It's literally written to be in the context of right now, everyone under lockdown and COVID and all the rest of that stuff. It's all part of the story.
That's great.
And it is the idea in part, and this is the part that really intrigued me and also made me a little jealous because I hadn't thought of it myself, was that the witches all have the ability to sort of astral project. And so that's how they're meeting. And but they're using that as the story frame for why it's all happening on Zoom and in a web series and all of that. So that's the sort of the conceit of the story.
Love it.
Which is just brilliant. Is just absolutely brilliant.
That's great. HBO will love it.
Yeah, and they intend for this to be all it's all women. It's all there will be women's issues that are a part of the storytelling. That's and great. Things like that are all going to be in there. It's all about getting more feminine voice out there, which is all of these things which are great. I love it. I'm absolutely, totally in support of it, and as you are, obviously, with all the things that you are doing, which is why I was so happy to share that. But the executive producer thing basically just came about as they are crowdfunding, and they offered that at a certain level, and I'm like, yeah, this is worth it to me. I can do that.
Great.
Boom. So I just, I if it weren't for Katie in the first place telling me about it, I might not have known. But now that I know, it's a fabulous project, and I'm happy to be a part of it, even if my part is just being essentially a financial backer, which is great. I mean, that's plenty right there.
Yeah.
Katie has learned a little magic from me, which apparently they are using in some of the stuff. And I told them if they need a magic consultant, they just need to pick up and call me, and I'm right there for them. So I'm really looking forward to it. It should be fabulous. It's going to be a wonderful thing.
Well, how can people donate or see it eventually?
It's on Indiegogo, and they just need to look up "Burn the Witch," and they'll be able to find they'll be able to find the campaign. Okay. There is a Burn the Witch Facebook page as well. So those would be the best ways to track it down. Great. And go from there.
Great. Well, I'm sure everyone will want to check that out, and I'd love to meet them. So I might want to support them also. So yeah, that'd be great. And people can people can find you at santiagomagic.com. And if people want to
Santiago's,
and then then you have a Facebook page too, Santiago the Magician.
Santiago the Magician.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we'll have that, and everything will be in the show notes. But so final questions. Please finish this statement.
Uh-oh.
If I could.
Oh. Wow. That is so open-ended. There are so many things that I would want to be able to do if I could. I think first and foremost, if I could, I would want to, fix all the things that are going wrong for us at large. The world is kind of in a standstill and holding its breath right now because of this COVID thing and politics and all the rest of that stuff, which, we don't need to dig into at all. But it's really caused a standstill. We can't really do much, and people are suffering for that. So if I could have an impact on the world, that would be the first thing I would want to have an impact on, is just getting us out of the logjam, whatever that ends up being.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's awesome. That's so you. It's perfect. And then you can leave us with maybe a something that you live by, or that inspires you, like a words of wisdom or a thought or a quote, anything that you want to leave with us.
Words of wisdom. Wow. Before I drop that on you, I want to say one thing, which is that this whole archetype series that we're going to be talking about is not my idea. It's lessons that I've learned from my mentors. So I'm really glad that I'm going to get a chance to share that with a wider audience. But I think that also kind of reflects into the whatever words of wisdom it is that I want to share. And that's, we achieve what we achieve by standing on the shoulders of giants. And I couldn't be where I am now without the people who are behind me, who support me, who have given me all of the things, all of the opportunities that I've had, which includes you. I mean, when you and I first started talking and figuring out that we were really on the same page in a lot of ways, you and I hit it off immediately and became, collaborative partners in a lot of things. And that is, I couldn't do what I do if I didn't have people like you supporting me, which is why I'm so happy to support you and everyone else.
Yeah.
We are better together than we are separate. That's just the foundational idea of everything for me. The things that separate us shouldn't.
Yeah.
But they do. And if there's anything that I could change about the world, anything that I would want people to understand, it's figuring out what they need to do so that they don't be separated from each other.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time, Tim, and we really appreciate you and Santiago's magic. So we appreciate that. And so stay tuned, everybody. We'll have the next series. Again, that's going to be a 4-part series. So just hang in there with us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, and bye for now.